So you want to figure out like what's the pain point that that person would care about. But the problem with doubling your budget is you might actually just be reaching that same audience with a higher frequency without which won't necessarily read more results. Until you get a sense of what the impression load on that platform is, it might be a better idea to bring in a different platform altogether.
Hey, Skip, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of our show, Growth Marketers Podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, what better guest to have than you today? Because you've had a pretty crazy story of how you got to where you are today. But for some of our audience who may not have heard of you, can you share a little bit about your journey of how you got to where you are and kind of have your founder story a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was a reluctant marketer, right? And then I wanted to be a writer. And the only writing job, I was 16 years old and was like, this is what I want to do. I actually did it because I was trying to impress a girl, who that girl is now my wife, by the way. But I was like, I want to be a writer. And the only jobs were marketing jobs. So I hit up all these ad agencies. I live in Greenville, South Carolina, where there's actually a lot of ad agencies for a fairly small town, and was able to get some decent freelance work. And then they were like, hey, you're young. Can you also do websites? And when I found out how much it paid, I was like, sure. Mm-hmm. So bought a book, started doing WordPress websites and started doing my freelance thing. And eventually that led to, in college and then after college at CNN, at Time Warner, they were building out their user-generated content platform, which became iReport. And because of my web design experience, plus I was a college kid who was doing user-generated content, so that ended up being a part of that team. Purely just right place, right time, right? And then from there, Clear Channel Radio was starting to build out their digital offering with the launch of what would eventually become the iHeartRadio app and iHeartMedia. And so was brought over there as the vice president of digital media and was there for the next decade plus before going out on my own. I realized that there was a great need for planning tools. One of the things I love about advertising is how objective it is. We know like what a landing page should convert at. We know what, Facebook ads should be and all of those things. Even though there's these hard objective metrics, it always felt like a guessing game when the client would ask the very reasonable question of like, hey, if I give you $1 million, what can I get in return? It always seemed like there wasn't a great answer for that. and so that's what we built. And the dynamic response advertising forecast technology, which became Draft, and launched that as a SaaS. And then in our first year, we realized this is actually the dumber way to do it, because the last thing agencies needed was another SaaS to pay for. And so we were getting all these requests of thanks for planning that campaign and building it. Can you guys just do it also? And so mostly behind the scenes, like about 60% of our business is on a white label basis behind the scenes. We're the nerds in the basement, if you will, the ad execution team. And that's what we are today. That brings us to now, where 2 years in since we made that change and of being more on the service side, on the actual ad execution side.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to your story because my brother and I started our company OneIMS, and during that time, we're talking 2006, there was not a lot of platform available for people to report on performance because the platforms that we see today didn't even exist. Right. So we were starting to see some call tracking technology. Google Analytics was its infancy. There wasn't a lot of insights that was available. You couldn't do form submission tracking because most of those forms were kind of hatched up form tools like what was available back then. So we built a technology that would use API to bring in Google Analytics data, Google Ads data, form submission data, call data, and bring it all into one place, and even keyword data, and put it in one place and report back. So then we were like, okay, we're offering this to our customers, but we should white label this and give it to agencies. We went and built that into an agency white label dashboard and try to sell to agencies. We've gotten the same response that you got, which was like, hey, I don't want the tool. Can you make the numbers? I don't need a reporting tool. I just need you to help me run campaigns so I can report the number to the customers. Exactly. So it's kind of crazy that agencies, every one of the products that you sell, obviously you try to sell something very similar. They don't want the product. They want you to do the work for them.
Hey, just can you do this? Which, I mean, makes sense. If you're say, mid-size agency, say you're an agency of like 20 people, one of your biggest fears is landing a $10 million account, right? Because you're not going to have the staff to fulfill it, but then if you do get that contract, then your biggest fear is losing that account because then you're going to have to lay off a bunch of people. So it kind of makes sense. They need humans almost more than they need tech solutions.
Yeah. So I think that's just validated our own life experience from what you've just gone through.
So if you're thinking about starting a SaaS business selling to agencies, good luck.
Think twice. Yes, that's certainly true. So, I mean, I think there's a valid point there, right? Because the hardest business to scale is a service business that has a very people heavy function. Because I usually have to have this conversation with the end customers. I tell them like, hey, you're asking me, can I give a discount if I pay quarterly or monthly or annually? Just because you paid me extra doesn't make the service any cheaper for me. I just have to have the same amount of resource. The only asset that I'm trading with you is time. And I don't necessarily have a machine that I can just speed up and it just produces more widget. And I think only if our end customers really understand, right? Like a service business, you have to appreciate if they're charging a higher price for it, they're investing into a higher quality talent and technology in some instances to really deliver a better quality service. If you get a vendor that actually is, oh, we'll save you $3,000, come to us. How are they able to save that money? By only either outsourcing to a foreign company or a foreign team, or having very low quality, incompetent people doing the job. There's no other alternative. So I would say, that's another thing to keep in mind.
The whole David Ogilvy, where he drew the triangle on the board for the client and was like, good, fast, cheap. You can pick any two of these that you want. That still holds true.
It's so true. Yeah.
In the service business, I don't see that changing.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously you, like you said, you built this platform called Draft. Can I explain a little bit about what that platform actually does? And I know you're not selling it as a standalone, but tell us how that platform can actually help people.
So basically what it does is it helps you figure out what the cost per lead or the customer acquisition cost is based off of your industry, what geography you're reaching, and what your goals are. So, if you're a roofing company in 2 different markets, then you need 20 extra jobs a month or whatever. It will help you figure out, okay, well, based on your current conversion of lead to job, here's how many leads you need. Based off of your leads, here's what your breakdown is, and then builds out the media plan based on that. Because we know that like radio, you should be able to get about 1% of the cume. So we know all of those other metrics. So it just sort of builds the plan based off of that end result.
So then you could actually then make very objective recommendation on budget allocation and channel choices so that you're not just throwing money at Facebook ads and hoping for the best, essentially.
Because one of the biggest problems, especially if a company is doing well, is let's say that they're having success from Facebook ads. Well, then common sense says, okay, well, then we just need to double our budget. But the problem with doubling your budget is you might actually just be reaching that same audience with a higher frequency, which won't necessarily read more results. So until you get a sense of what the impression load on that platform is, you actually don't know whether doubling your budget's a good idea. It might be a better idea to bring in a different platform altogether. So,
and are you pulling that data from existing by connecting to their current account and then looking at their historical performance data and then making that judgment call?
Yeah, that's the ideal situation is if we can, because again, every client, every agency is a little different. So sometimes we don't get access to their historical always. If we don't get access to their historical, then we pull it based off of industry. If we don't, ideally, we're using their real data to make those recommendations.
Understood. So obviously you built this technology because you saw this void in the market that people are wanting to spend money. They always want to know what the return on investment is, but you couldn't with a straight face give a confident answer because you just don't know what's possible. So you said, well, I'm going to scratch my own itch and go build this platform. And then you built this technology. And then you come to realize that people don't actually just want to buy the platform. They want you to execute. I think you've said about 100 plus customers that you're serving. Is that all agencies that you're serving or is end customers?
No, we're at over 100 actual end clients. And we're just now really coming out of our, what we would call even though we're in our 3rd year, we're just now coming out of stealth mode because I really wanted to have we just acquired a business last August. We just acquired the direct mail and promotional marketing company. I wanted to have a full, robust offering platform before we sort of shouted from the rooftops. And I wanted to know that our metrics were good and that our data was good and that I can say confidently if we make a forecast that those match up and all those things. So it's been purely organic growth so far. And so that's where.
So basically you're building an omni-channel offering that's built on a technology that has some sort of a service component to it so that you're helping them actually on the execution side. So let's talk about, everybody uses this word omni-channel. It's been around for quite some time now. Sometimes they say multi-channel, sometimes they omni-channel, right? Like there's all words interchangeably used, but it's one thing to say it and it's another thing to actually execute it, right? And then also doing it for a consumer brand that actually is a direct to, consumer versus B2B brand is a slightly different approach there. So can you talk to us a little bit about what is omni-channel marketing? And then also how do you start to think and plan to execute an omni-channel program?
Yeah, omni-channel really does just mean more than one channel, right? It's just the
Hmm.
Latin omni, meaning multi. So it just means multiple different channels. The reason why it's a good thing is because we run into the what I call like nothing buttery problem of marketing, which is you run into nothing but this. So
Hmm.
let's say that you're just going with that roofing example. I don't know why that's in my head, but whatever. Let's say you're a two market roofer and you run into, oh, well, Google ads are work or LSA ads or, or the local service ads are working. So therefore I want to do nothing but LSA ads. The problem with that is that we know that established brands, in other words, a roofing company that I've seen and heard before and know who they are, is going to outperform a company that I haven't seen or known or heard before. So you need some sort of branding component on top of that. Now, it is budget determinant. The first thing I would think of is I think of marketing. Obviously, everyone thinks of the funnel, right? Where the bottom of the funnel is the folks that are actively in market, actively searching, right? And then above that is the folks that are soon to be or could possibly be in market, those sort of folks in the consideration phase. And then above that is the folks that may someday be but aren't right now. You want to try to stretch your dollar as high up that funnel as you can afford. You want to sort of max out the folks that are actively searching because obviously if you're a roofer and
Hmm.
someone's looking for a roof, you want to make sure that you're there. But it is also a good idea to have another layer on top of that if you can afford it. As long as you can afford to make an investment that may not pay off for 3 months or more, it's a good idea to also have hey, do you have hail damage? Get this free report on how to see if your home has hail damage or whatever. That would be more of that consideration phase. That's not going to be an LSA ad or a Google ad, right? That's going to be more of a Facebook ad, social media ad, maybe even a TV or radio ad. And then if you can afford it even more to go one level up and start telling about how you've been in business, since for 20 plus years and how you hire the best folks and how you offer green solutions or whatever. I'm of course making all this up, but you get a little bit of a storytelling component if you can go one rung up and start doing things like podcast ads or which can be programmatic now, or radio ads or TV ads or whatever. The higher up that funnel you get, the more you're able to differentiate yourself. And in an ideal world, then when someone in that market needs a roof, they're searching your company's name, not roof near me or roofer near me. And if they
Hmm.
do search roofer near me, you still show up there with ads and they're more likely to choose you over the others because they've heard and seen and known you before. So that's
Yeah.
omni-channel in a nutshell.
So that I mean, is a good example from a roofer and a B2C perspective.
Right.
How drastically different is the B2B approach to that same sort of a omni-channel program?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think so, B2B marketing really is, I think of all advertising as nothing more than a specific message to a specific audience
Hmm.
to achieve a specific result. That's the sort of math formula in my head. I'm reaching a specific audience with a specific message to get them to do something, right? Or to get some sort of result. And so on that front, it's really no different. You just have a different audience. I'm trying to now reach like the purchasing department of a manufacturing company, or I'm trying to reach the CMO or CEO or whatever, the C suite level of this industry. And then you just try to think, what do I want this person to do? And what's the next step for them? So, an omni channel campaign, I might choose LinkedIn instead of Facebook because I can more specifically target based off of industry, right? It has more accurate information and things like job history and things. But other than that, the whole process doesn't really change that much. I do think that branding becomes less important on the B2B side because you have less emotional buying, especially depending on the size of the companies you're working with. Like if you are working with the kind of businesses that will have 3 quote requirements or purchasing departments, brand doesn't matter as much. However, very few business, like even on the business side, very few decisions are actually made without emotions playing a part. Like I
Hmm.
think the only time that is the case is if there is those, they have to be 3 equal quotes from 3 different companies, and it's got to go through Tim, Betty, and Sarah, the purchasing department. Only in that case is it purely unemotional. The rest of the time, brand still matters.
Hmm.
And so if you can afford that Super Bowl commercial, you should do it, even if it's B2B.
Hmm. So the majority of my audience is B2B, and a lot
Yeah,
of them are in the boring spaces, like the very not like you said,
right.
brand is probably not something that they would ever invest money into, right? Because they just don't see value in it.
Right.
Even though there's definitely some value in the brand recognition aspect of it, right? Because if you may not even get the chance to even bid on it if they never heard of you, right? Like
Right.
that awareness definitely do matter, whether that means you had your name listed on some sort of a business directory that you spend money on, or you've had some exposure at some trade show by being there as an exhibitor. All of those things are giving you an opportunity to brand yourself, even if it doesn't necessarily directly
Exactly.
come down to an actual inquiry. So having that said, right, I think, you mentioned a little bit about, hey, the B2B audience at the end of the day is a specific message to a specific people at a specific time, right, for them
Yeah.
to take a specific action. So if you use that as the kind of the thought process behind what is marketing is, what is advertising is, then my question is, especially with these boring industries, what we've noticed as the higher up on the responsibility role and the function of an organization, the less reach you have with these people. Meaning, like, they're not necessarily the one making the search in Google, right? Because they delegate that responsibility. They're usually not super active on LinkedIn, even though they might have a profile.
Sure.
And then, a lot of times they're making decisions for influencer who's dealing with the problem, not necessarily them personally dealing with the problem. Meaning, like, a VP of sales is not the one who's upset that the stupid CRM isn't doing what it's supposed to do and is clunky and is horrible. He cannot open it on the mobile device. It doesn't talk to his email, right? Like, the problem is actually experienced by not the person that actually usually writes the check or have the power to write the check. It's usually the guys that are in the bottom of the role. So with that said, right, how the heck are we going to do omni-channel marketing to reach those people and then actually get them to do that specific action that we want them to do?
Well, for anyone, no one's going to buy anything unless they have some form of ability to make the decision, which that's what you're talking about. They have to also have some sort of problem or pain point, right? And then they also have to have the budget. Mm-hmm. So you need to think, well, what is that, like you said, VP of sales, his problem or her problem is that the salespeople, quote, aren't using the CRM, right?
Mm-hmm.
He or she doesn't recognize that it's the CRM that's broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's like, okay,
or he just won the sales, he doesn't even care, right?
Yeah,
like a lot of times he just hit the number.
Yeah, right, exactly. Usually they are like, all right, well, why isn't this data good or whatever? So you want to figure out, like, what's the pain point that person would care about? That's your message. Then targeting that person has actually never been easier. I mean, you do have the ability today to run, I made that joke about a Super Bowl commercial, but you have the ability to run household specific targeted ads to where you could literally have, say you had a list of 500 ideal prospects. I mean, you can surround those people so that when they hear you, when they're listening to their favorite podcast, they watch you when they're turning on their favorite TV show that night. They're watching, you wouldn't want to do traditional broadcast if your target's that narrow. You would want to do something like Hulu or an OTT platform. But you have the ability to get more targeted than ever on other platforms. So you're not limited just to those direct call response like LinkedIn, even display ad type platforms that aren't likely to yield a result, because to your point, I go to my LinkedIn never. So, and that's because I'm a curmudgeon. I think I only go to the ads manager platform, like literally. So you might have someone that has one but isn't ever there. So don't reach them there. Reach them on the Hulu ad or those things. Then when cultivating that white knight in the organization, right? Cultivating that person who's going to be your champion, that is at the lower, that can't quite say yes, but is going to influence the decision in some way. Then when that person brings your company's name up to that decision maker, they go, oh yeah, I've heard of them before. So awareness is not out for the B2B world. As a matter of fact, I would say that it's actually better than ever for awareness campaigns in the B2B world. Because
so practically, how do you execute? Obviously, I know you're building this platform that allows you to have some other access into those third-party platforms, right? So how do you even go about starting that? So let's just say, for example, I'm trying to sell to the manufacturing companies and I need to speak to the manufacturing CEOs. Most of those guys are in their upper 50s and maybe even in the 60s, probably second generation family that's running that company.
Right.
They're not necessarily in the weeds every day. All of those things are true of those people. How am I going to get in front of those people? Can you give us some tactical steps of how you would do that in terms of whether that's a Hulu ads or pre-roll ads in a YouTube video while they're watching at home?
Well, it can be a little bit to do it kind of the level that we would do it. It can be hard because it would require having like you would have to have a data miner to enrich the data to then take everything over to IP address, and then you'd have to use something like a LiveRAM and a trade desk. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but to take that, so call us would be one answer, or call, but one way that you could do it yourself is if you have your target list. Google Performance Max is actually great at being able to identify folks. So when you have that sort of first party data list of here's the people that I'm trying to get in front of with a free Google Ads account, you can create a custom audience, upload those folks. You'll be limited to Google's channels. You'll be limited to YouTube. But I mean, that's YouTube TV, which is an OTT platform, and display and search. So it's some pretty great channels that is a campaign that you could execute yourself, and for any amount, then you could put $200 behind it if you wanted to.
Yeah, but I think people have mixed feelings about Performance Max, and they say, especially with some of the search functions, a lot of times the leads that come through, they say it's from click farms and not, sometimes it's bots that are filling out the form. So there's like a little bad rap around that. So
the search side, I think, stinks. But from an app, it's the best, I think, of the self-serve if you do have a list, folks. But yeah, as a search platform, you have very little control over which, I think you can only put in, I think, however many keywords it is, but you're limited only to broad match keywords. You're limited, which is a problem in and of itself. The location targeting is approximate. So there's definitely some legitimate complaints about PMax, but if I had a $500 budget, that would be the platform I would go to.
Yeah. And I even heard from at least our teams talking about it, that they said that the search campaigns, even with broad match, they won't even tell you the keywords. Now they're just grouping all the keywords and say, you spend $8,500 on this group of broad match term, but you have no idea what those terms are. So how the heck do I know where my money is going?
Well, that's why also too, I would not do any of the pre-made audiences in PMax, not to get too in the weeds on PMax, but their pre-made audiences, I mean, it's different if you're a pizza company, right? If you're selling pizzas, then that's fine. But if you are trying to get to these decision makers at these 500 companies, don't use any of the audience signals. You surely want to use your custom made audience based off of that CSV file you upload. Don't trust any of the other targeting because it's all going to be waste. So don't be, it's tempting. It's tempting to be like, oh, manufacturing is a choice on this audience. Let me choose that. But don't choose that, because then you'll be running, I don't know, you'll be running ads to some 18-year-old like cousin of somebody that sweeps the floors at a factory.
Yeah. So this approach that you're describing, right? Like the way that you're explaining how we can target these specific group of people using OmniChannel, how far different from a typical ABM or account-based strategy?
So ABM is, it is an ABM strategy. It's just not stopping at the lead gen side of ABM. ABM is the right tactic to go with. It's just usually ABM campaigns are purely for lead gen. It's purely asking for the appointment, right? It's purely saying, hey, demo my product. Let's schedule a free demo. That's where I think a lot of those campaigns fall down, because you're asking someone, a typical person, especially a decision maker. Let's say that they value their own time. I'll put it that way. Let's say they value their own time at, say, $100 an hour, $200 an hour. You're essentially asking them for a $200 purchase cold. And so that's where a lot of those campaigns fall down. So it is an ABM strategy. It's just more thinking of it as a awareness type campaign to try to warm up that lead. And then you can, if it's a video campaign, you can retarget off the people that watched, say, half that video. And then that can be the one where you're asking for the demo. So in other words, you can have a video that talks about what you do and why it's best. That has a soft call to action on there, something like check us out. And then you can remarket, and that can be the one where you ask them to marry you, because you're asking for, like I said, $200 cold. That's where a lot of those campaigns quote, we tried that and it didn't work. It's like, well, what was the messaging like? What was that? Were you asking for the appointment too early? Because even contact information, there was actually an interesting study. I wish I could remember where it came from, because that would make it more interesting. But anyway, there's an interesting study that people value contact information at $50. So even if you're just asking for someone's email address, that now has an association in their mind of about $50. So what you're offering, that white paper or that resource or whatever it is, needs to match about a $50 value for that person to be willing to take action.
Yeah, I think there was some study also done by Drift and very similar concept in terms of like the conversational marketing
Yeah.
that they were talking about. Like people don't want to wait a long time either. When they're
Yep.
actually just filling out a form, they're like, how long is it going to take and when am I going to get a response? There's a lot of, questions that they have in their mind. Or when they download an ebook, they're already afraid like, well, what am I going to get right now? I'm just going to get inundated with a bunch of
Yeah.
automated email, right? There's that anxiety when you're trying to fill out a form,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
So that's there. So in the sense of like a direct response, a booked appointment isn't what you're going for. What's kind of the KPIs you're going to measure to see if you're actually successful with the omnichannel strategy that you're describing?
That's where being able to see and map out and plan a funnel, and especially an omni-channel funnel, is so important, because that is ultimately what you do care about, right? Like at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, you do only care about how many leads were booked, how many sales were made. So that doesn't change as the primary KPI. It more changes for the steps along the way. So let's say that I've got an awareness type video ad running. My main thing that I'm going to care about there is attributable visits. So how many exposed households saw that ad and then showed up on the site. So that's how I'm judging, is that ad doing its job. Then I go down the step and I'm like, let's say that we got a client that is like, hey, we're not getting enough leads. How I back into solving that problem is, okay, what's the traffic on the site? Like how many attributable, site visits have we had? All right, if that is over the forecast, then okay, then we need to make some changes to the site. And because we use heat mapping and all of that stuff, it'll be like, here's where it's dying, change this. If there's not enough people to the site, then it's like, okay, did my video ad not drive the visits necessary? Did my remarketing ad not bring a warm traffic coming back? Were they still only spending 30 seconds to a minute on site? Each step along the way needs to be judged for what its goal was. That's why doing a LinkedIn ad that says book a free demo,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it works. Very rarely does it work. It only really usually shows a ROAS if you're making $30,000 or $40,000 per customer. You can actually do those campaigns and it's fine, because you don't care if you've got $1,000 customer acquisition cost, because you're making so much off of them.
Mm-hmm.
But a much more effective campaign would be that we start off with a video ad, then we're remarking off of that with maybe a LinkedIn ad to ask for the appointment. Now I'm able to get appointments for $3 or $4 as opposed to $20, and I'm making up these numbers. But that's why planning these things out, that's how you judge it, because ultimately it is still all about leads and sales.
Yeah, I totally understand because I do see oftentimes a lot of direct response on LinkedIn and I just swipe right through
Yeah.
because I have no interest in it. And oftentimes also just all these ebook downloads is what I'm seeing, a lot of reports and research. As soon as I click, it's already pre-filling all my information. I'm like, I don't know if I want to fill my inbox with all this other spam.
Yeah.
They should just give me that PDF and let me go read it. And if I find value, yeah, sure, I'm going to go probably reach back. But I'm not sure. Is there enough value in this PDF that I'm going to give my information? So I do see there's a big shift toward the gated content being not so appealing to most businesses. Like it's just not interesting enough because they just know what the outcome is going to be as soon as they finish submitting that form, right? Immediately, SDR is going to call you and bug you,
Yeah.
and then you're going to get inundated with a bunch of emails.
And it's not really necessary anymore. Gone are
Mm-hmm.
the days where you have to have someone give you their email address to be able to reach back out to them. So you don't, like, there's all sorts of web de-anonymization tools, and there's all sorts of other, and even just simple remarketing. Instead of running that ad of, hey, give me your contact information, I'll send you this ebook, like you said, instead just give them that ebook. You can still have a pixel on the page
Mm-hmm.
where that book lives that allows you to then send that person ads and get that person engaged in more and more and more content. And that's going to be a much easier ask, because the only reason you want their contact info is so you can spam them with emails, right? So you can keep emailing and emailing. You can do that now in other ways. So just do it in those other ways, and you can still keep up the conversation going.
Yeah. I think the problem is though justifying sometimes to your CFO and the senior leadership of, oh, we spent all this money, but we got nothing to show for it. Well, by the way, we got a lot of people look at it, right? Like I think that's where I think marketers are struggling to make that switch, because at the end of the day, they're still asked, how many leads did you generate? How many MQLs and SQLs? They're being measured on it. And as long as we have that as our measuring route of success, it's going to be very difficult for them to stop measuring that, right? It's just, I think that's where we're all stuck. We want to make the switch, but you got to also, your budget is going to get cut if you can't show the number of leads you generate, even if it was but just spammy ebook downloads.
That's why it's important to know the game you're playing, right? Like if you're a CMO, if I'm a CMO at the company and my boss has said I need to generate whatever it is, 200 marketing qualified leads, that becomes my game, right? And so that's the game I'm playing. That's not the greatest thing in the world. If I was the owner of that business, I would say I don't care about that. What I care about is revenue and sales. But at the end of the day,
Yeah, which is why I think there's a shift toward the revenue of the pipeline created or pipeline generated, right? It's becoming more of an important measuring success, right? I think that shift is happening. Can you tell us a little bit in terms of how the heck are you able to do a direct mail drop to these people? And then I also want to hear how much of the privacy concerns should be thought about, right? Because I know there's a push toward GDPR compliance and CCA, the California, I forgot the actual acronym now, but all of those are actually, becoming more of a strict guidance to follow for marketers. So the privacy concern, as well as the ability for you to be able to drop a direct mail to someone who actually saw your ad.
So when someone comes to a site, first of all, everything should be built with GDPR compliance, in my opinion, because what you don't want is something that's fantastic and you could have to stop doing it in a year and a half, right, or something like that. So go ahead and make sure that anything you're doing is GDPR compliant. Because you also don't want someone from like Canada getting on the page and then suddenly you're getting sued, right? That's also no good. But if there's a cookie disclaimer and part of that is, say, a request for location access, this is how we do it with the direct mail. If there's a request for location access, when they say yes, then we're able to identify either the MAC address, if it's a cell phone, or the IP address of that home or business. And then it's essentially just skip tracing that and enriching that data to be able to get the physical address. And then, that's the benefit of having an in-house direct mail company, right? Is that then we can drop a direct mail component to that individual. And it's not something that is terribly hard from an execution standpoint. The only thing that's difficult is just having all those automations and workflows set up. So it's like once you set that up, it's fairly simple actually to be able to say. On an ABM basis, it's even easier because if these are the individuals we want to reach and these are those folks, then getting that information and enriching that data and skip tracing that data to be physical addresses is super easy. And then you just execute a direct mail campaign to those folks.
Yeah. And then when you're, especially for a multi-location business, you're able to get to that specific location that individual might be working from as well?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Because things like cell phones, if it's a company cell, it depends on whether you're trying to reach the company or whether you're trying to reach the individual. But there are all sorts of different ways to play with that same data to try to figure out what company is this person with, and or if you care about the other, who is this individual that's on this. And because it's all interactive data, in other words, it's something that they've had to say, yes, I give permission for. It's first party data, it's GDPR compliant, it's okay. The things you're not allowed to do is cold email that person with like a 12 email drip sequence. But even though you have their email address and you have their cell phone information, that's easy to get. You just don't do that, right? You don't. So that's where people get in trouble, is that then they're like, oh, we've got these email addresses, even though they never filled out or opted into anything. Let's just put them in our newsletter sequence. That's the part where people get in trouble. So you just don't do that. You can't text somebody or email somebody, at least not long. So you can cold email. I don't think can't cold text at all, I don't believe, but you can cold email once, but you can't drop someone into an automatic sequence without permission. So just don't do that piece.
I know. Also, just now you're going to need to have your own legal counsel in your office, kind of telling you what you could and you cannot do, especially from a sales and marketing standpoint. Right. I would say in closing, my question is, obviously there's a lot of talks about AI and how it's enabling in doing your job better. But where do you see AI helping in all of these things that you described from an omnichannel marketing standpoint?
Well, we use it a lot to help in a few different ways. One of the ways that we've been able to make channels talk to each other that don't normally talk to each other is because we have an AI scraper that is able to pull things from information from an ad log and put it into another platform without a human being having to do it, right? Even if we had done it a year and a half ago, it took a person exporting that information once a week and then uploading it, right? So we're able to make it so that it's real time. So from a back-end automation standpoint, AI is fantastic. Also, too, similarly, for example, phone call leads have just become a sort of horrible thing. You get so many bad leads from phone call leads. So what we've done on that front is we not only just record phone calls, but we also transcribe them, have an AI transcribe them. And then we have another AI that scrubs those looking for appointment setting language or language that's appropriate for that business. I'll go back to my roofing example. If they're talking about a time and date to meet, then it says, oh, this is a good lead as opposed to a bad lead. So that's another just sort of cool use of AI. But the biggest thing is that it's a time saver. Like, I wouldn't use it to create final creative or final stories and those types of things, but it's a lot easier to tweak headlines than come up with headlines new. And
Mm.
so I would never go to market with something that's purely AI generated or anything like that. But I just see it as a big time saver. So operationally, it's great because you can have it do, if you're paying somebody like to do like the same 2 or 3 tasks over and over again, you can free that person up who probably hates that task anyway, have them do something more beneficial, and so that they're not just having to export spreadsheets and upload them into this other system. That's an AI job. The other end is, I see it just making things easier from a creative standpoint too.
Yeah, I guess I would just add like data analysis too, because a lot of
Yeah.
times we are all inundated with so much information. Like you said, if you're doing multi-channel or omni-channel marketing, you have all this data being collected on impressions and visits and clicks and conversions, and maybe even able to distill it down and say, hey, these are the 4 campaigns that have driven the most amount of conversions. Figure out how you can do more of those campaigns, or like you said, probably invest more budget into those campaigns. That could also be a way to get some efficiency.
Exactly. That's where I see, you mentioned that you created a sort of dashboard of sorts. And dashboards are handy, but I do see that being a great use of AI, basically sitting on top of dashboards, essentially interpreting it for the person. Because
Yeah.
a lot of folks, I mean, even me, I mean, like with when Google Analytics changed to GA4, it's like there's this time lag of like, wait, what is this actually saying? And so,
Yeah, and it forecasts the traffic too, which is another confusing part about it. It's not sometimes the GA4 shows forecasted traffic, and
right.
you think it is actually real time, and it's not. It's actually just expecting to have, oh, you're gonna have this much traffic this week,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but it's not. It's not there yet. So that's another thing as well. But I guess Skip, I certainly enjoyed our conversation. You shared a lot of insights. How can people hear more about you and possibly get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can email me. Probably the best email is to do our info at draftmediapartners.com, and then our website, draftmediapartners.com. And if you're in the marketing space, we can get you hooked up with our platform and all of that. We don't charge for any of that. And if you are in need of actual campaigns and executions and those types of things, feel free to reach out to. We're happy to do a consultation.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for your time and appreciate you sharing some of your life lesson and practical examples of how people can do a better job with their marketing.
Thank you.
Awesome.